Hi everybody. Like I mentioned in the intro video, my name is Burke and I'm here to share with you my story about anxiety and depression. And I want to start the story where it all began for me, which was the year 2011, 9 years ago. It was in the spring of that year. And to start my story off, I want to read a song, read some lyrics. They give a wonderful opening to my story and how I feel about life. And it starts like this. Welcome to the planet. Welcome to existence. Everyone's here. Everyone's here. Everybody's watching you now. Everybody waits for you now. What happens next? What happens next? Then the next verse goes, welcome to the fallout. Welcome to resistance. The tension is here. The tension is here. Between who you are and who you could be. Between how it is and how it should be. The story it started in spring of 2011. I was a junior in high school. And to start the story, I had been in a relationship with a girl for about 9 months. I had a really strong emotional attachment to this person as a 17-year-old. And it was a time of life when things were changing. Things were changing fast. It seemed like a lot of my friends were getting involved in their own activities, and in some ways so was I, and we seemed to be going our different directions. And I was spending all of my time with this girl, this specific individual. And to kind of give some background on what was going on there, this girl had relationships with 2 of my best friends before me, and then after me, at least 1 more of my friends. And this created a lot of tension between the people in my friend group. And it created a lot of stress for me, and I think for my friends, because I think some people felt hurt or betrayed when this girl seemed to move on from one boy to the next. So a very complicated time for me. One day I was home from school. I was sick that day, hadn't been feeling well. I was just sitting on the couch watching TV, and I looked at my cell phone. Back in the day, we had the little brick cell phones. But I look at that phone, and I'm like, nobody's texting me today. Nobody has asked where I am and what I'm doing. And it's school in those days. I had my group of friends I'd eat lunch with. I'd see kids in my classes each day. And, I thought people had to have known that I wasn't there today. Maybe nobody really cares. And even that girl I had this thing with, she didn't say anything to me that day either. I felt alone, and I thought maybe these friendships that I have are more of a facade than I realize. I guess the question came, did these people really care about what was happening to me? I didn't know. I wasn't sure. And it started that day. And for the next little while, a couple of weeks, I spent most of my time just ruminating kind of about that. And I think when I got back to school, saw friends and things, I think that was in the back of my mind of, do these people really care? And in hindsight, I think a lot of them did, but we were all young and, dumb. But those worries kept building in my mind. And eventually it turned into something that was out of control. It turned into this anxious panic. And it started with me not sleeping well at night. It started with me not eating well. And then progressively got worse and worse, to the point where within maybe a month of that initial incident, I was not getting more than a couple hours of sleep. I was not eating. I couldn't hold anything down because the anxiety was so great that I was nauseous. And honestly, I was so wrapped up in my mind that food almost didn't even occur to me to eat, because I was thinking about all these things, like what's going on. And then the panic seems to build on itself. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and then that brings stresses of its own. It's tough to do anything when you don't sleep. It's concerning when you don't eat, and it's hard to keep any energy. And then this spilled over into my schoolwork and into my relationships and everything. And it just got worse and worse and worse. I told my parents at this point, I said, hey, I don't know what's going on with me, but I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I'm going crazy. And luckily for me, my parents have some experience in the psychiatric field. Both of them do. They had some idea of what was going on with me. It got real bad one night, and my parents called my neighbor who lived down the street, who was a psychologist, and said, hey, will you come speak with our son for a little while? And he came over and spent, I don't know, maybe an hour with me. We made a list of things that I was worried about. And, kind of like a counter thought to each worry of like, oh, I'm not sleeping enough. Well, can you still function without sleep? And the answer is, yeah. You're not near 100%. You're at like 30% maybe. Well, I guess that means I can still do 30% of what I could do before. And we did that with each different thing. And I felt better for a few hours until my mind got right back into that again. Right back into that worry and panic and struggle that just seemed so impossible to break. This neighbor of ours referred me to a friend of his who's a psychologist who dealt more with anxiety and depression, the things that I was going through. I began to understand kind of what was happening with my body, that I wasn't going crazy, that I wasn't losing my mind. This was my body's fight or flight reaction, and I was in flight mode. I was in that adrenaline pumped up, fear for your life kind of thing. I felt a little more comforted when I learned more about it, but I still just couldn't break it. I couldn't get out of it. And it was so wearing on me. So once I had gotten in to see this psychologist, we also felt like I needed to see the doctor to see if I could get some medicine. And at this point I started taking trazodone, 100 milligrams at night to help me sleep. And it would knock me out, and it did the job. I would sleep. I'd still wake up anxious the next day and start the same routine over again, but at least I was sleeping again. I also had some Xanax that I would take on rare occasions, although I did my very best to avoid that because of the potential addictive nature of that medication. My counselor was very good to warn me about that. Things improved a little because of these things. But things with my friends were not getting any better. In fact, they were getting worse. And I ended my relationship with this girl, and that didn't go very well, and that created a lot of stress between my friends and I. But it still felt like the right thing to do for me, and I feel like the way I handled that situation might not have been great because of just how anxious and I was dealing with all this stuff at the same time. That ended, and I felt, I think, more alone, and I was dealing with all of this, and the only people I could really talk to were my parents and my counselor. And it was enough though, and it got me through. At this point, school was starting to wrap up, although I had to drop out of some of my classes, and I got very poor grades that semester. I was normally a straight A student, but got quite a few C's that semester and just barely made it through. School got out, I spent time at home, and things got better because they felt normal. I wasn't around these situations all the time anymore. I was sleeping again. I remember people telling me at the time that I just needed to quit worrying about things, that I just needed to focus my thoughts on other things, and it was just so impossible. I remember I took that advice very seriously for a time, and there were a few days where I fought off the thoughts, and it took everything that I had to just not even think about it. I felt a little better, but it was always right back to the same thing. So during that summer, after school had got out, I slowly made amends with some of my friends, and things got better for me. And my counselor and I, we thought that this episode was over, that I was going to be okay, that the anxiety was going away. Things were settling back to normal. Later that summer I went to Guatemala with my mother, met some new friends, had a good time. It was a humanitarian trip. We got to help some people. And I felt better, and things were good after that. My senior year of high school was one of the best times of my life, and I thought things were going to be good from then on out. But about 6 months after my high school graduation, I had a relapse because of some new changing circumstances in my life. I had met somebody else who I was starting to have feelings for that brought up past fears and trauma from this experience. And I was also preparing to serve a Latter-day Saint mission, both of which were, things that felt threatening to me. And I think my anxiety just kicked right back into gear. This time, it lasted for longer and was much worse. And that I will discuss in part 2 of this series.